Thank you for joining us on Student Docs. I'm your host, Carole Adrienne, and today we are so lucky to have two of my favorite young filmmakers, Sean Park and Anjali Bose. We're actually going to address two separate issues with what we're discussing today, and one is the topic of Sean's feature-length documentary in production, which is about climate change and personal issues that lead to activism on climate change. And then we're going to talk about the value of teamwork or community. And you're going to see, whereas Sean is a filmmaker, he's one of those guys who does it all. So what you're going to see, he researched, he shot, he edited, and in one case, he translated. But there are quite a number of people who make up the cast of Sean's documentary, and they come from all over the world. We're going to see clips from Brazil, from South Korea, and he also has participants from Taiwan, South Africa, and it's really quite a strong piece. So I'm going to start by asking Sean to please tell us what inspired you to start working on this piece, and how did you round up all these far-flung experts?
Right. Thank you, Carole, for the introduction. So what got me started with this documentary project is something it goes back 2 years ago when I started in the summer of 2019. I started with the case of having a camera and having film equipment and taking that equipment to my trip in South Korea to visit some family. And I noticed there was some very heavy dust pollution. I learned more about it while I was there. And I realized, I kind of want to take footage of the things that are going on here. And my cousin happens to be an environmental studies major at Seoul National University. So with his knowledge and the experience of the people in the area of Seoul, Gwangju, and Tanyang in South Korea, I decided to collaborate with these people and accumulate these experiences to truly try to get to the root of why dust pollution was such a harsh thing in South Korea in particular. But this was just the beginning, and little did I know the beginning of South Korea would turn into something a lot greater. The scope of this project would open up to more of a global spectrum. And over school, I didn't have as much time to pursue this project because I was very busy with other responsibilities. But once the pandemic hit, it allowed me to really look back and see what I had so far and look forward to see what I want to do. And by that point, I had also done an internship in South Africa with respect to entrepreneurship. I also met some people that are in an environmental activism club in South Africa. And I also made more connections with people in places like Taiwan and more people in the US. And I decided I wanted to make this more of an international adventure and to accumulate even more experiences worldwide to understand not really, just about where climate change comes from, what we can do to fight it, because I feel like there's a lot of great documentaries you can always also see about that, but just to truly get the human aspect of how climate change affects each individual person, and just seeing how this happens throughout the world, I think would be a very, is like my goal, and I hope it's an effective one.
You said a very interesting thing when we first talked about it, in that climate change is a global fight, but it's also a local fight. And I think let's take a look at your clip from South Korea, which is really enlightening and unusual. So very powerful piece. So we're going to take a minute and look at what he filmed in South Korea and the lady who talks so eloquently about it.
여기는 시골이라 마이크에다 대고 방송을 해줘. 여기는. 그래서 미세먼지 있을 때는 나가지 마라. 가급적이면 나가지 마라 그래. 미세먼지 있을 때는 우리가 마스크를 하고 다니잖아. 근데 마스크를 하고 나가도 목이 컬컬하고 진짜 그럴 때가 있어. 너무 심할 때는 앞이 한 50m도 안 보일 정도로 컴컴할 때가 있었어. 그렇게 심해. 근데 나라는 적인데 자동차도 많고 자동차에서 매연이 많이 나온 것 같고 또 공장 부지에서도 모든 매연이 엄청 많이 나오고 아무튼 내 생각에는 자동차들이 많은 것 같아. 근데 시골이 공기가 좋긴 좋아. 나무하고 겹하고 그래서 겸해서 그런지 아무튼 시골이 훨씬 좋지. 시내 나갔다가 여기 들어오면 벌써 공기가 달라. 그러니까 시골하고 시내하고 틀리고 도시 내음이 훨씬 심하지.
That is a strong piece, Sean, and you did the translation as well. This is a pretty Renaissance effort on your part. Now, you also spoke with a scientist in Brazil, Dr. Barros, who tells a pretty unforgettable story using the example of a frog. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you met him and what happened when you interviewed him?
Right. So during the pandemic, when I was, trying to do this more of an international venture, I joined an international youth-led climate activism organization called Fridays for Future. And through this community of people, I became the video coordinator, and I helped them make videos, produce videos about spreading awareness for climate change. And I also told these people they were from all around the world about, my own documentary project. And one of them is a student at Brazil, and she told me that she's working with a scientist / family doctor named Enrique Barros. And so I started communicating with Dr. Barros. And after a long time of communicating, talking about what we want to discuss in an interview, I interviewed him over Zoom. And did you want me to explain what the analogy of the frog was, or?
I'll tell you what, let's let Dr. Barros tell the story, and then you can follow up with some additional information about it. I thought it was a very strong piece. So this is Dr. Enrique Barros in Brazil, as presented by Sean Park Films.
So, hello, Mr. Barros. It's great to finally do this interview with you. I'm really glad that you're here. As you know, I'd love to talk with you about, the climate change crisis in Brazil. So first of all, would you like to state your name, the place where you reside, and what you do for a living?
Yes, thank you, Sean, for the opportunity. My name is Enrique de Barros. I'm a family doctor in a rural town in the mountains of southern Brazil, next to Gramado, which is more or less a known city in South America. And I'm also a medicine professor at a local university, Universidade de Caxias do Sul. And I am currently the chair of the Working Party on the Environment of the World Organization of Family Doctors, WONCA. Basically, we are now about 130 family doctors interested in the relationships between the environment and people. So our motto is healthy people, healthy planet, or healthy planet, healthy people. Historically, family doctors have been concerned with the environment. And now we're understanding that the environment is much more interlinked, interconnected within nature. Human beings are part of nature. And that we do have macro geopolitical drivers of planetary health that interfere with the local life.
Mhm.
Do you know the analogy of the frog in the hot water?
I do not. Could you
Have you
explain?
heard of? Yeah. So if you have some sort of a pan and you have water, like tap water, you put in a frog, and the frog stays there because it's cozy for it. And you put it on the fire, right? And it starts to warm slowly, slowly. And the frog just stays there. It doesn't realize that it's getting warm slowly until it's too late and it can't jump anymore out of the water and it dies. So I think that's a good analogy. The thing is, the climate is changing very slowly, and people that are not looking at the science or that are not connected to the land, they just don't see it. So it's like the frog in the water.
Okay, so tell us that story. I cannot get that story of the frog out of my mind. What else did you have? I know you've had a lot of time to think about it. Can you give us some of your thoughts too, Sean?
Right. I do think that Dr. Barros really does highlight, a gigantic aspect of the problem of climate change throughout the world. Like one of the things that really got me into this project was about how people seem to be ignoring the problem of climate change, because in the U.S., which is where I live, it's not as apparent, but you'd be surprised how apparent it could be in contrast to other nations like South Korea or places that are facing like gigantic coal production and like also dust pollution there, like Brazil. The contrast between the health of the environment is quite severe, and just seeing how people in the United States are a lot of us are just ignoring it. Some of us are even claiming it's not even doesn't even exist. It really triggered me into thinking, this is really important. I want to do something about it. And but I'm still just a kid. I don't have like a degree or anything like Dr. Barros. I'm just trying to do what I can do as a filmmaker. But I think that message about the frog in the water is really what sparked me to start to use my filmmaking passion to help address that issue.
I thought a lot about that last night. In this area in Philadelphia and New Jersey last night, we had strong tornado warnings, and in fact, tornadoes touched down in this area, which is not an area used to tornadoes. I know when you go to the Midwest, O'Hare, Midway Airport, and you see signs for places where you can go if there's a tornado, safe havens really within the airport, but we're not used to that here. And so I thought about that frog last night when I was listening to the news, and they were elaborating about it touching down in very familiar areas to we who live here. I want to point out too, Sean is young. He is an entering freshman at University of Pennsylvania, and yet this is not his first rodeo with film. So we have featured Sean's film on the moral of murals, which has really gotten a lot of attention from people I know. Everybody has enjoyed that and been inspired by it. So you're actually an experienced filmmaker now. And we're looking for a lot more to come forth. So now, of the people that you've interviewed, there's somebody else here, our friend Anjali Bose, who is a rising sophomore at Loyola Marymount, and whose passion is filmmaking about environmental issues. Am I right about that, Anjali?
Yeah.
Okay. And we've seen her film, The Bubble, which to me is one of the best examples of how to tell a story in 5 minutes, beginning, middle, end. It was just beautifully shot on her iPhone and edited on free iMovie software. So everybody at home, you don't need the whole fancy setup. You really just need the will and the story. So now Sean is going to interview Anjali at some point in the future about her passion, which has to do with sea otters and kelp forests. Anjali, can you tell us a little bit about it and how you got interested?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess, yeah, thank you for that introduction. And I guess, like you said, I go to Loyola Marymount University and I'm majoring in film and television production, but I'm also minoring in environmental studies. So I actually kind of began working on this project more under the lens of like research done for an environmental studies class I was taking. And later on, I kind of got the inspiration to maybe pursue it in a more documentary-esque format, which is like the steps that I'm taking currently towards it. But like you were saying about sea otters and kelp forests, the project basically focused on keystone species, which a sea otter is, which means that it's a type of animal that they are like a vital part of the kind of pyramid in that ecosystem. So that ecosystem cannot survive in the absence of that animal. So that's what a kelp forest is. A kelp forest needs sea otters in order to be successful, because one of the main predators of kelp forests are sea urchins, and sea otters are the only actual like species that are local to kelp forests that will like eat the sea urchins essentially. So they're an important aspect of the kelp forest, and without the sea otters, the kelp forest can succeed is basically like the crux of it. So I kind of was really interested when I learned about these keystone species in this class, and I knew I wanted to pursue that further. So while I was kind of doing this research, I learned a lot, not only about sea otters and how their quality of life is pretty, I guess, like pretty just like in a very sad way affected by the degradation that's occurring to kelp forests as a result of climate change. But then it's kind of this positive feedback loop, as because these kelp forests are impacted because of climate change and rising temperatures of water in the ocean, in like oceanic areas, that causes sea otters to leave these environments. So then the kelp forests continue to degrade even more because there's the absence of the sea otters. So I kind of just saw that there's this whole trend occurring. And I think a lot of oceanic environments kind of akin, like adjacent to kelp forests, such as coral reefs and things like that, have a lot of research being done on them right now about how these rising temperatures in the ocean that we're experiencing right now are impacting their environments. But kelp forests kind of, and I don't quite understand why, but I feel like they kind of go a little bit under the wire and don't get as much recognition. So I sort of saw a really interesting way to kind of combine both what's happening with the kelp forests and really focusing on the sea otters kind of under that lens as a really cool story maybe there to like explore further, I guess.
Mhm. Sea otters are so cute. They're one
exactly.
of my
like
favorite mammals because
yeah.
they really seem joyous, and they seem like they're having fun. So it really doesn't seem fair for sea otters to lose their preferred environment. I know very little about it, but I know that some species are considered sentient species, like frogs, for example. And when we begin to see changes in physical appearance or behaviors, that is a signal that they're being affected by something in their environment. I guess, do sea otters fall under that?
Not so much physically in the same way that you'll see with some reptiles, I guess, like with your frog example that you just gave. But I think definitely, actually, while I was doing this project, saw a really cool study that was done that really tracked sea otters' use of, because they're one of the few kind of like sea mammals. Sort of, I think dolphins are also here, and then these aren't mammals, but octopuses also do this, where they've been shown to use tool like to create and use tools in the ocean. And this really cool study focused on that aspect of their behavior and saw that in non-kelp forest environments, that kind of like elevated intellect and ability was not shown as much. Like they have a much higher capacity for that kind of brain activity and those actions in kelp forest environments. So I definitely think more in a mental behavioral sense that kind of shows where when they leave these kelp forests, their quality of life has been now kind of seen to be lower than it is in kelp forests. But they don't have a physical, where I don't think their like actual coat or things like that will like show these physical changes as much. I don't believe. I can't say that for a fact.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so interesting though that everything I think is starting to change faster now, just in the way that we saw the tornado last night, or the incredible heat in the Midwest and the Southwest that at levels we haven't seen before. So it's much more, I think, visible than it has been. I wanted to talk to both of you guys too in terms of technique. Now, Sean, I'll bet Zoom is like the director's best friend at this point when you're doing a documentary with global issues, and it's really not a good idea to fly around the world the way it might have been 2 years ago. What's your take on the people that you're going to continue to interview and how you're doing that?
Right. So, as I said before, I tried to gauge a lot of experiences from diverse group of people from around the world, and I think I've been successful in hitting those points. And I'm still trying to communicate with the International Climate Organization to see if I can get in touch with any more people that are around the globe that'll be willing to share their experience as well. But for now, I think I have like 5 nations outside the U.S. that I've already interviewed, and I have footage for. That'll include my documentary. So I'm going to focus on perspectives in the U.S. As you said. I want to definitely talk to Anjali about her experience with kelp forests and otters, because I think that's a very unique point of view in the field of climate change and activism, as well as my environmental science teacher this year, Mr. Croxford. He is huge on surfing. He's huge on surfing, and he has a lot of surfing buddies. He always talks about how climate change is like kind of changing the patterns of the waves as well, and like kind of patterns
Oh
of.
my gosh!
It's just like I don't have all the details, but that's why I got to also talk to him about these kinds of things. And my a cappella director from school, he's actually also a huge climate activist, and he's working with a group of churches to form kind of like an environmental climate awareness alliance. And so they're all doing work together. So all these different perspectives, I feel like what's different about my project isn't about, just like the political landscape or like, why climate change is bad, because I think there's a lot of resources for us to already know why they're bad. But it's just to truly give like a peephole into the lives of people and give specific examples, like unique examples of how climate change does affect people, from kelp forests to otters, to surfing, to even church groups coming together, or from Dr. Barros's perspective. He's a family doctor, but he gives a lot of medical advice as for the people that live in the surrounding villages of Brazil about how to live healthier lives, even though the air quality, the water quality isn't the best there. So people's lives are like individual lives are affected by a lot of different factors of climate change. And it's just like my take on this documentary, as you said, as I go forward with this documentary, is just to truly shed light on those unique experiences with climate change.
I think it does a really good job of bringing that home. Like when you think of climate change, surfing is not necessarily the first thing that I think comes to mind. I mean, you're not thinking about sports, but in fact, it's going to affect any sports that occur out of doors, and surfers are certainly going to feel that. It does become a very personal issue. I wanted to ask Anjali too, now you're looking at research that takes place underwater for the most part. Are you planning? I know that you're planning ahead and you're going to be working on this probably for the next year or two, but are you going to have to arrange for underwater photography?
No, great question. So I am currently, and I guess, I shouldn't say this and like jinx anything because this is so in like the early stages, but I've definitely reached out to, so I don't think I said that, but my research that I was doing for this class and that I'm going to continue to do is specific towards the Alaskan Peninsula and the Aleutian Islands. There's kelp forests in various parts of the world, like in Indonesia. There's some actually in Monterey Bay, which is pretty close, like all things considered, to like Los Angeles and where I go to college actually. But I was focusing up in the Alaskan Peninsula personally. So I've been having some very like tentative early stage conversations with some research facilities and a marine biologist up in that region of the world. So I guess we'll have to see how everything goes with that. But I definitely feel like in a perfect situation, if things worked out how I'm hoping we might, I would definitely want to be able to get up there and actually begin to film footage there. And I'd probably pursue something like getting a scuba diving license, and I guess just like working on underwater photography, getting funding from my school, getting funding from maybe other sources. Like I've actually personally talked about Carole some like other opportunities for funding to get, I guess, proper underwater equipment. But it's definitely also, like you've been saying earlier, easier today to even find the means to like film things underwater with an iPhone and things like that today. So it's certainly not like completely unattainable, but this is all definitely big thinking that like none of this is even close to being set in stone. So I don't want to be too like idealistic right now.
That's okay. I always think the beginnings are so fundamental to creating your base. So we just have a couple minutes, but I want to ask Sean if you have any advice for people starting a project that's going to involve others. Now, I know you are the mastermind and the conductor, but there are an awful lot of people who are going to be involved in presenting this issue. What would you say to other people like Anjali and people thinking about getting together a group or getting group perspectives?
Right. So I think I talked about this a little bit last time about my mural arts documentary. I worked with 3 other people, and what happened was we all had different visions. We all had the same goal in talking about the importance of mural arts in Philadelphia, but we all had different visions of getting there. But truly communicating with each member of the group and, coming to agreement to one thing, not like, saying, not compromising. Compromising, I think, kind of like the end result wouldn't be exactly what each person would want, but truly coming to a conclusion about, we want to do this way. And each of us can say that we can like enjoy each part of it or approve of each part of it would definitely be important. So communicating with each member of a team would definitely be really important. And in the case of talking to people that are far away, like I did, just staying on top of, communicating with them as well, and just keeping in touch with them, because over time, what might happen is that they might forget, or you might forget, because unless you're continuing to like keep them updated about what's going on and what you need from them, their priority might not be as much on you. So it's just important to communicate with people, no matter where they are or what their role is in the team.
Keep them in the loop. I think that's good life advice in addition to being good filmmaking advice. Oh, Sean and Anjali, thank you so much for joining us today. I think you guys are working on really important issues, and I think a takeaway from this is that we all need to be good stewards of our planet and good stewards of each other. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll be with us on Student Docs next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carole. Thank you so much.